for the media to defend for their rights, but I cannot defend the rights of my officers. Well, let me tell you this. I've just begun to rumble. No one is going to attack my police officers unjustly and expect me not to defend my police officers. That is leadership. And people who may not understand that probably never led a small goal team in Maracas on a Sunday to understand what leadership is about. Leadership is one when you stand up and you fight for those under your command if it is that they're being unjustly treated or targeted. But in the same manner, as we come to some important points, I am the first person that will try to remove and discipline any police officer who will breach their regulations. And as you would have seen around the world, it has been noted that in the same situation with what happened in Minneapolis, this police officer on several occasions, he was actually disciplined, questioned for several other matters prior to this. It's just that this one, he went to a point of no return. And on every occasion, when it is that this officer should have been removed from the police service, there are unions, there are organizations that would have fought down those police chiefs. I go through the same situation. So please do not get me wrong. In no way would I defend wrongdoing. On several occasions, I have fought now to try to remove and fire police officers if they're involved immediately, if they are charged for rape, kidnapping, murders, violent offenses. And in the same manner as unions have been doing with police services around the world, I am getting pegged back as well. I am getting that pushback by the Social and Welfare Association and other persons that they say that it is the constitutional right of the individual not to be deprived of his employment until he's found guilty. He should not be tried twice for the same offense, and all of these things. My concept is that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, our officers are expected to be at a higher standard. The discipline should be much higher than the average citizen in the average job, which is why it is that we accepted this position. And I need to make sure that no police officer must benefit or feel that, listen, I can gain from being involved in criminal activity. And if it is that, for example, police officers are charged for any such violent crime, I insist, and I will continue to, that those persons should be fired. As I stated, that is what happened in Minneapolis. I do not want it to happen here. If I see police officers are involved in that type of activity, it should not reach a point where they should be suspended on full pay or still remain as police officers. So in the same manner that I will defend my officers, I will be the first to stand firm and remove those police officers if it is that they're involved in any type of questionable activity. I would now like to just make note of a situation before I hand over to DCP Jacob, dealing with the findings pertaining to the soldiers and the police officers that were involved in that very high-profile matter that was aired and recorded pertaining to the individual, where that individual was forced to drink alcohol, and there was a weapon that was pointed at him. We have completed that investigation. We have liaised with the DPP, and DCP Jacobs will reveal the findings and what action is or is not to be taken. However, before I hand over to DCP Jacob, I'd just like to mention pertaining to the matter of ACP hack show. There was a situation where there was a concern pertaining to funds in the account of a senior police officer. Again, I wish to state that usually the standard operational procedure is that the banks would trigger a red flag based on suspicious activity. It will then be sent to the FIU. The FIU will then forward it to me. I will then receive it, and then I will pass it on to the relevant agency based on the type of investigation. I may hand it over to the ACIB, to fraud, or whichever agency in the white-collar crime unit. However, in this case, there was never a red flag from a bank. There was never a suspicious activity red flag from the bank. It was a senior police officer who passed on the information to who went to the FIU through another officer to ask for this to be investigated. So this was never a situation of suspicious activity from the bank. Having said that, I immediately, as I stated that we would do, we will never condone any activity, and we will make sure that we remain transparent. I directed that a thorough investigation will be conducted. The thorough investigation was conducted. It was revealed just a few days ago, and there were no findings to show any criminal action was conducted by that individual. However, as this has become a very high-profile case, and in an effort to show a full degree of transparency in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and in the public's interest, as well as to ensure to the public that we do not cover for police, because there's always that concern of police investigating police. And also in the benefit of even Mr. Hackshaw, whereby some continue to play police, prosecutor, and jury to continue to state that what happened, they believe that that is contrary to what was investigated. What I have decided to do is to send the findings of the investigation to the office of the DPP for him to review those findings. With this now, I will now ask DCP Jacob to give two matters. First, pertaining to the findings of the incident with the soldiers and the police officer, and also we will just deal with something pertaining to the drastic turnaround we have seen as it pertains to the detection rate, especially murders. So I'll now hand over to the DCP of Intelligence and Investigation, DCP Jacob.
Good afternoon to all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago worldwide. We are all aware of the situation that we had that went viral as it relates to 2 persons of the Defense Force and 2 police officers involved in an incident that occurred on the 29th of March 2020 at George Street in Port of Spain. That matter was in fact investigated by our Professional Standards Bureau of Investigation. The officers went about locating the persons involved in the incident and continued the investigation. A file was submitted and they got instructions from the DPP. But before that even occurred, our internal investigations, both police officers were in fact charged for discreditable conduct. That is internally within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. The investigators are today presently at the DPP office finalizing the various charges to be brought against the 4 officers, the 2 Defense Force officers and the 2 police officers. There will be various charges ranging to assault and mischief in public office. All the offenses will be listed and we will provide the media and Trinidad and Tobago with the various offenses as recommended by the DPP. There are in fact some other issues to be dealt with the investigation. So the investigation is supposed to come to a closure by the end of this week. So again, I wish to thank the officers of the Professional Standards Bureau for their gallant way in how they went about doing this investigation. And this demonstrates that the police service is here to provide proper service to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And whenever any incident occurs, whether it involves police officers or members of the Defense Force, or any citizen, will do our investigation without fear or favor. So again, that investigation is coming to a close.
Thank you, Mr. Jacob. Before I hand back over to Mr. Jacob, it gave us no pleasure. Obviously, we should give no organization any pleasure when something like this transpires, that would transpire. However, as Mr. Jacob stated, we will continue to be very transparent. At no time will the police service try to cover for police officers. We will continue to do it, but in the same manner, we are not going on a witch hunt to try to please individuals if they had a personal agenda. Before I hand back over to DCP Jacob, as it pertains to the detection rate and the crime statistics for the last few months, again, it goes back to comments made by the media where actually members of the media, someone stated that the police service spent too much time dealing with COVID and we should have spent more time dealing with fighting crime. I do not know if it is that those individuals who are aware that if you look at, probably if it is that you try to measure the performance of police services around the 200+ countries in the world, Trinidad and Tobago might definitely have been in the top 10 if number 1. And that has to do with dedication of your officers in Trinidad and Tobago, their dedication to duty. Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, they were the front line. So, turn this off, please. They were at the front line as it pertained to doing what was required to secure the lives of each and every citizen in this country. I think that is what should have been seen. Instead, it has been seen that we spend too much time dealing with COVID. If it is, we operated probably like our other police departments or services around the world, and we saw what is happening around the world, people would have understood why it is that our officers were out there 18 hours a day, sometimes 6-7 days a week, going out there doing what was required. I recall a few years ago, the persons in uniform, they were given medals just because they did 2 days of good security work for COVID and the summit. What we have seen of our police officers in the last few months, they definitely deserve a medal. And I think they should be seen as heroes in ensuring that they saved many lives by doing exactly what was required. Whereas in some countries, many police officers went too far and you saw the abuse of power. Other police departments, they said and did nothing. Many of them went absent. And because of that, you actually saw the COVID rising. We went within exactly what was required. We stayed in our lane, did what was required, and the results are there to show. So instead of certain persons trying to discredit the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, I think you should really compliment and commend them, those officers out there, for what was achieved. And again, going back to the reason why they said that was because there were a few double homicides a few days ago. So what persons are trying to say is if we spend less time dealing with COVID, the lives would have been saved. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, we do not have a crystal ball. It is not that you cannot anticipate when a crime would have taken place to have stopped the murders. However, which is what I'm going to hand over to DCP Jacob, because of the game changing that we have done in crime scene investigation, there's a system that is being used now. Yes, we can always relate to why it took us so long, but it takes a lot for a proper transformation of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, from the use of technology, management, structure, DNA equipment and so forth. And what you would have seen is that even though the persons were killed within 48 hours, based on a unification of work through the crime scene investigative team, the research analytical unit, the cybercrime unit, the homicide, the CID, SORT, all working together within 48 hours, persons there was a homicide on one island, but yet we were able to pinpoint and arrest certain individuals on the other island 48 hours later. That took a lot of work, a lot of dedication to duty. And again, it is sad because there's a saying that, good news wouldn't count. In January, there were 60 murders in a month or somewhere around that period, and that made two nights of documentaries on a nightly television show. But in the month of May, it has been the lowest number of murders in the last 5 years, and that didn't make news. It may not make news that of all the murders that were solved last year, more murders have been solved this year after just 5 months. So, or the situation that took place with murders in Tobago, and 48 hours later in Trinidad and Tobago, the individuals were held. So sometimes it may just make that if it is good news, can actually be as put in the forefront as the bad news. And with this, I just ask DCP Jacob to elaborate, please.
Yeah, I wish to reinforce some of the points made by the Commissioner. The last time I appeared here, I explained to you all the changes that we made in relation to having an actual support team for our homicide investigative unit, where we have combined persons from our cyber unit, our analytical, research and analytical unit, the copper branch, the SIU, the intelligence unit, and we have a team supporting the homicide investigators. Since we adopted this approach, we are seeing a significant success as it relates to the detection of murders. And this is also influencing in the reduction of murders. We are hoping that as we escalate and solve our murders, that it will act as a deterrent to others who wish to commit this heinous act. It is clear when we compare with last year. I would like them to go to the second slide that we have there. Right, the second slide, please. Right, when we go to last year, you will see that this year we already detected approximately 43 murders, even though the 43 murders that were solved in this year, we have a few that were solved from the previous years. It is still significant work. Again, it is important for us to recognize that even though murders may occur sometime a year ago, we continue doing that investigation. To add to the homicide investigative team, we also have officers who work in what we call a cold case unit. These officers will look at the solvability factors as it relates to the outstanding murders, and they will make all efforts to solve these murders. Again, the team that we put together will also support the cold case team in the investigations. So again, you will see that we are getting reasonable results, and within the next few days, we will be having some more positive results concerning recent murders. The Commissioner mentioned the murder in Tobago, the double murder in Tobago, and at least at this stage, you all know we held 2 persons, and that investigation is actually on its way. And as I said, very soon you will get some positive results. And we have some other outstanding murders that we are dealing with. We can go to the other slide, please. Right, and you know, we wanted to highlight Tobago a bit to show that those 2 murders were basically the first 2 murders that occurred in Tobago for the year 2020, right? For 2020, the first 2 homicides that occurred in Tobago for 2020. Again, we want to thank the officers in Tobago for the good work that they are doing in relation to holding down murders and shootings and woundings in Tobago. Right? We want Tobago to remain serene, and as they say, green and serene, so that we can in fact be sure that we are safe when we are in Tobago. So I wish to thank the officers again as it relates to the work that is being done in Tobago.
And before we turn, just for information, there's a difference with homicides and murders. So as it is at this time, these are still homicides. So we still have to verify if it will be classified as a murder. Because remember, there's an investigation that is ongoing. We have reports that the individuals came out of the vehicle, they confronted the possible perpetrators. So as it is at this time, there are still 0 murders in Tobago until we can verify if the homicides would be classified as a murder.
Right. So basically, we are seeing that we had in fact 24 murders less than last year at this time. When I talk about the reduction, right, it is nothing much to boast about, but in spite the little surge that we had in murders within the last 96 hours or so, we are still in the deficit, and we are looking to widen that gap as we go along in the reduction of murders. So again, I wish to thank the officers from the Homicide Bureau of Investigation. It takes a lot of time and energy by these officers in conducting the investigation, and with the added support provided to them, we know that we'll have good results, and Trinidad and Tobago will in fact be a much safer place as we reduce the murders and the shooting and woundings. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Members of the media, so before I open for questions, again, just to clarify, what we have now is a crime scene investigative team, and it involves different groups in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, from a CCTV representatives from the Operational Command Center, from the SIU, which is our intelligence body, persons from the CID, persons from the relevant division, analysts, all get into the crime scene, packaging everything, working together, getting all the information upon which we can then analyze the situation and then know exactly who it is, could be the possible perpetrator. It has worked, it has proven to be very effective. It can and it would improve, as I stated, through the use of technology. Hopefully, very soon we will be able to get the repair of most of the cameras so that we can have a better lockdown of the country also with the use of facial recognition, likewise with the implementation of the forensic department for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. It will be able for us to track now also all different aspects of crime, and we can even go back to cold cases. And then the final one obviously has to do with human intelligence. As I stated, there's no such thing as a perfect crime. Someone will see something. Unfortunately, in this country, when the vast majority of murders that take place, no one sees anything. The only time that there's a shooting and someone sees anything is only when the police officers are involved. So with that, I'd open questions to the media.
Good day, everyone. Nicholas Suchman Singh from TV6 News. Commissioner, going back to yesterday at Queens Park Savannah, it seems that there are persons who may not be fully informed as to what could happen in public spaces when it comes to recordings. You know, people are mostly accustomed to media doing recordings, but when it comes to the Ttps, is that something, a new thing? Just explain to the public what exactly is going by the Ttps and what would be the use of the footage gathered from recordings.
Okay, the recordings from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, it can vary from a number of things. It can vary from identifying if a crime is being committed, especially when you have mass gatherings. We can be in a football game, and it happens worldwide. What it is that you will be doing recordings, and you can pick up something of a possible perpetrator. I'll give you an example. If you have European football games, recordings take place constantly. So as soon as an individual makes a statement as it pertains to a racist comment or action, that is how it is that persons are banned for life in England because of that. So I don't know if anyone who ever goes to an English football game is going to say the police must not be using cameras to monitor me. So because even when you have mass gatherings, incidents can take place, and sometimes the police might be able to use that recording to assist to pinpoint a perpetrator. Guess what? For example, the individual who decided to play Starboy and flick the cap off, by that the recordings taking place now, we can know who is the individual, who is the perpetrator. I thought he looked a little like DCP Hackshaw, but it wasn't Mr. Hackshaw. He just looked like him. And so it's a number of different things. And then after, we have our communication department where we actually, on a daily basis, you'll see the communication department, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. It is second to none. And what we do is package it on a regular basis, and we send it to the same media for you all to show what happened in it, because remember, we have to take our own recording and be able to package to send to the public. So that is all it is. It is not, you have to be, I mean, to say, well, we think that you're going to record to victimize us. What I see is the hypocrisy is that everyone has a camera and no one asks for consent. So it means that what you're trying to say is that citizens have a right to record police officers because they just want to see what they could get to say, aha, catch you. But police officers must not record. And the reason for police doing the recording, as I stated, is for all the right intentions. What they did by someone standing up to say, well, do we have consent? He just wanted to be a star boy. This was a time, it's my time now, it's show time. And he tried to, so he decided to become the Speaker of the House to ask for consent and to see if everybody would say, yes, Mr. Speaker. He totally was clueless in understanding the law. This is public space. And I want to remind the public as well, if you record a police officer, there's nothing that prevents you from doing so. I've heard situations where there's been a degree of confrontation with police officers and even security officers. That is incorrect, especially if it is in a public gathering.
Good day, Commissioner. Jens Levin with the News. I have several questions. I don't know if we have a number of questions we are allowed to ask. But we'll start off with what we just stopped off. Have we identified the hat flicker, and what, if possible, charges could be brought against this person?
Well, again, as I said, I do understand. I do not want us to go down the road of what we've seen worldwide, where there's been confrontation with the police and persons who are protesting. We are also protesting and voicing our concern, and we stand in solidarity. So this is not, some persons probably wanted that to happen. It did not happen. When we looked at the video footage, however, that individual was definitely not in line with what the vast majority of persons who went there to see. So we would be meeting with that individual. We're going to have a nice conversation with him. It doesn't mean that every single time we have to look at each situation, hear exactly what happens, and then we will decide. So it's not a situation that we are going to say that as soon as we find this individual, he's going to be arrested. But we are looking forward to have a very nice conversation with him. And for him, before we do anything, we'd like to hear persons speak and explain why would you do something so stupid, so reckless. A flick of a cap is one. There have been situations where police, because they are reluctant to be involved in any sign of aggression, they back off, persons circle and surround the police officers, they are beaten, they are stabbed, they are shot. We have to be also careful and look after the well-being of our police officers. You saw what happened. It was a mob rule that took place around that police officer. It was totally unacceptable. We actually saw an individual take his hand and slam down the camera of the same police officer. Had it been the other way around, all hell would have broken loose today by how the public would have seen the police officers. So as I said, I don't want to state that this is what is going to happen. We are taking it one step at a time. The next step, we intend to have a pleasant conversation with him.
And the step after the pleasant conversation?
Well, only after we have that conversation, we'll know what the next step will be.
What is the law, if it exists, that bars people from recording in public spaces?
There's no such law that prevents that, especially if it is in public place, by citizens or even police officers. So you can't just come in the Queens Park Savannah and say it is my right to record, but police officers, you do not have a right to do so. It showed that those individuals, the lights were on, but there was no one in.
I want to jump to DCP Jacob. How are you doing, sir?
I am okay.
You made mention of, I want to come back to your commissioner, but I'll give my colleague some time. I'm going to spend some time with Mr. Jacob.
Thanks.
Solvability factors, you made mention of that. Could you clarify what that means in terms of some of the cold cases?
Well, the cold case, we call it cold cases because it in fact matters that occurred a while ago, some months ago, are in fact outstanding. The cold case unit will go through the file that was prepared by the initial investigator, look at all the statements, all the evidence within that particular file, and at that stage they will see whether or not there are things to be done and what is the percentage or the chances of that case being solved in relation to the amount of work that is still required. Therefore, as in some instances, we may see in the file what we call basic, what we may say low-hanging fruits, basic things that can be done to help that investigation be propelled. So that group of persons will do that, and then we'll go to the DPP to get further directions.
Now, why weren't these low-hanging fruits identified prior? Because we are sticking here with the cold case unit. How come the previous investigators didn't pick up on these low-hanging fruits? And what, if anything, will be done differently going forward to ensure that we don't bypass these low-hanging fruits?
When a file is initially prepared by the investigator, as you go along, there's in fact information and evidence that will come to hand as time go along. That information and evidence will be added to the initial file that was prepared, and at that stage, you will now look to go forward. So the initial investigator, he and his team will look at it, and they will say, well, look, okay, we have a 20% solvability factor in this. But as evidence come along, as the investigation go along, it will in fact raise the solvability factor.
Yeah, and may I also add, as it pertains to improvement of the detection rate, going back to what I spoke about with the police service, very soon having our own forensic department, when persons are arrested, they will be swabbed. And then when you're swabbed, now we'll have a DNA database. Because what happens is, for example, in a rape case, you will get the sample and it stays there in a shelf. That serves no purpose unless it can be linked to a possible perpetrator. So now by doing DNA database and banking, everyone who is arrested, you swab, you can now link that individual to many different crime scenes where we had data. So that is just a simple example of what we will be doing very soon. And I'm speaking about in the next few weeks, hopefully, that will be linking now. And I just can go back to dealing with cold cases.
And in order to reinforce that point made by the commissioner, that is the reason why we are trying our best to speed up the whole aspect as relates to ballistics and deal with DNA.
That's right.
Because we may have to wait to get the ballistics report information, and we have to wait to get the DNA outcome, right? Sometimes we had a delay in some instances in getting even aspects of the fingerprint. So when this sort of information comes to hand a few months after, then we will look at the case again and deal with it in a particular manner. But now we are putting things in place that we can get these results within 48 hours, like what we were doing within the last 2 weeks or so, and you'll see that we are getting quick results as the reports are made.
My last question for you, before I pass it on and come back to the Commissioner a little while after. You made mention of the DPPs, the soldiers and police officers involved in the alcohol drinking and whatnot. Well, alcohol sharing, but you're not talking about the video. What came out of the internal investigation in the Ttps? What sanctions, if any, were brought against the police officers?
I mentioned at the beginning that these officers were actually charged even before the primary investigation was completed. They were charged for discreditable conduct. They need to go before a tribunal within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and be tried according to our standards that is required within the Ttps. So they were charged with discreditable conduct. The matter that will be going before the court will take some precedence, but that will happen within the next few months.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Jesse Ramnu from CNC3 News here. Now, apart from the hat flicker, you had also mentioned there were people who would have attended yesterday's protest to deliberately cause commotion, right? Based on your assessment, because you were there yesterday, have you identified these people, and what will the Ttps be doing to de-escalate situations sparked by some of these detractors who may take away from people with a noble cause?
Well, thankfully, we have not seen, we can't even compare to what we've seen worldwide, where persons have been involved in arson, destruction of property, looting, frontal attacks and assaults on police officers. So we do not have that situation in this country, because this is a very good country, it's a great country. And what may happen for the most persons trying to use the opportunity, as you just mentioned, to try to uplift themselves, to make themselves marketable. It is the opportunity to try to ramage. And we will be aware of it. Now, what happens, unfortunately, is when persons, the empty vessels make the most noise. If you look at that same situation, those persons who are screaming the most, shouting the most, are those persons who probably really don't, some of them I should say, they are not there really for the movement, but they are there to cause the confrontation. And it will totally diminish the value of what that is there for. So we will understand, we are not going to take the bait. There are some persons who want us to be baited, they want us to respond, they want us to act. We are not taking that bait, because that is exactly what some want, to say that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is similar to the others. No, we are totally different. We are cut above the rest. And that has been shown in how we dealt with COVID in comparison to other police services around the world. And it is going to be seen as just like how we are dealing right now with the situation of the concern based on what happened with George Floyd. And with that, we will be very calm, we will be flexible, but what will not be accepted is that, again, what we did now is we have shown to the public this is what happens when it is that you give persons an inch and they take a yard, because we sat back, we said nothing, we did nothing, and that is what usually happens. That Wolfpack syndrome, they will push and they will circle, they will surround, and today was a hat, tomorrow it could be somebody hitting a police officer, and when would it stop? So there would be times where the police officers must draw a line. The line was drawn when that person hit the hat off the officer's head. So as much as that we would continue to be as flexible as possible, and which we were yesterday, because we realized persons took off their masks. They started deliberately, not social distancing. They went on after the time limit. They started surrounding the police officers. They started hitting the camera of the police officer. They stole a hat from a police officer. What next? If it is we continue to give them an inch and then a yard, it is not going to a mile. So after that, that was their last inch. We are not going to condone any such act, whilst in the same manner, we intend to be as flexible as ever, because we can't stick to the letter of the law based on the present situation with COVID. I do have that flexibility as the Commissioner of Police, and I would do so. I would give the flexibility, because this is a very sensitive situation, and if it is the police decide to operate high-handed, that likewise is an avenue that some would use, because as I said, some are using Black Lives Matter as an avenue to try to hate and demonize the police service, because that's what they do. There's one individual, every single release that he makes is about the police service. And I do wish to advise him that the applications for the Deputy Commissioner of Police would be coming up very soon. He may need a master's. You need a master's, so I don't know how that one goes. But people who want to be police, so that's all they write about. So they just want to find ways to attack the police service. There's a plan and there's an agenda to that. I want the country to understand there are persons who have an agenda to bring down and affect the police service, whatever reason it is. I am not going to have the persons use the opportunity during Black Lives Matter, a matter like this, to try to demonize the police service, whilst at the same time we would have a strong degree of flexibility to allow persons to protest. Yeah.
DCP Jacob, you spoke about cold cases and the probability of it being solved and stuff like that. One of the most highlighted cases that have gone cold over the years, probably I think 20 years, it's the case of Akil Chambers. Could you speak on that a little bit as to whether it's going to be one of those cases that's going to be brought back into the spotlight to be solved, seeing that we have new technologies around it, making things more capable of being solved?
Well, what I can say is that all these matters, all these murders that occur, is never really closed. As evidence come forward and information, will in fact open the matter and investigate it. So if there is additional information, evidence coming forward in relation to that particular matter, it will be open and it will be investigated.
Okay. Commissioner, you said one person applied to protest outside the U.S. Embassy, saying that there will be 4 additional persons with them. It turned out that there were hundreds. What is the protocol when it comes to applying for a public gathering as that? Were they in violation of that request that they submitted to you, that you approved? And what could be the consequences for something like that happening again, where persons violate a request to the commissioner when it comes to numbers?
Well, remember, I'm not using the word copycat, but the individual, he made the request with all the right intentions. He expected no more than 5. But, you know, persons passed, they saw what was happening, they joined, they call a friend. So this was not done with any degree of deceit to try to fool the police service, because it would have affected him and the organization. They expected just a handful. If it came to more than 5, they would have been in different pockets. So this was done without any intention of causing problems. It was just, they lost control. And this will usually happen when there's a national concern or international concern of a sensitive nature like this. Persons want to participate, they want to contribute, they want to voice their concern. We must not in any way as a police service be seen in any form or fashion to try to prevent you from your constitutional right to voice your concern and your hurt and your anger and your pain. Whilst at the same time I have to balance it. It's a delicate balancing act where I have to make sure that you have your constitutional right, whilst at the same time I have regulations that I have to enforce as well, so I have to balance it. And then if I shift anyway, I could tell you, I shift one way, people started saying, oh, but you did this with this person. Imagine people had the audacity because of the guy who lifted his, who stole the hat. People, and I'm talking about attorneys, they said the only reason the police allowed him to get away is because he was white. That is what I have to encounter. So that is what, and this is a very senior attorney, and he actually put that on Facebook. He says because the man was white. Now, if that is what he calls white, well, boy, but that is what we have to go through. Everybody is an analyst, and they believe to find an avenue to think of everything. That is not it. The fact that another person said, but I was arrested a few years ago, and it's because of my race that they arrested me and not them. It's always about me. It's always about but what, and there's always the but what about posse. When the police do something right and they cannot find any avenue to condemn, they go to those 3 words, the but what about. The but what about is an avenue to go back to something that could be something that's controversial, because you cannot find any negative based on what the police did yesterday. So the police did everything correct yesterday, so it turns the but what about, until a senior attorney decided to say that the man who stole the hat was a white person, and that is why the police let him go. Well, the police didn't let him go, by the way. He ran. He actually did a Forrest Gump on us.
Just one quick question relating to what is actually happening right now on the Queens Park Savannah with the vending huts on fire. Are we going to use intelligence to find out exactly what took place within the last few moments, because the rain just fell and now there's a fire in the Queens Park Savannah? could it possibly be mischief?
Well, we don't know. So far, I'm getting different reports pertaining to an individual who did it. The individual may not be stable. I'm getting different reports. So until we confirm what was the reason for it, all the relevant units are actually on the location at this time. And as soon as we confirm what actually transpired, we will inform the media officially.
Commissioner, based on the current climate, are you personally concerned about an escalation in race wars and hate crimes in this country?
I don't think so. I think the only target of hate is the police service. I personally can't see there being anything else because, and this is what I'm trying my best. There are persons who want to use, so it's not I don't think the only time you have that degree of animosity in this country is when it comes to politics. But this general election, I can give you assurance, in the same way the last two carnivals was the safest in the history of this country, this general election is going to be one of the safest ever. I am setting the tone very early. And again, it actually will go with police officers. There's a police officer that has been thoroughly investigated for actually boasting about which political party he would be supporting, and he stands by the principles of that party. I don't want to say much. Stand by for next week's media conference. I am not going to have any police officer trying in any form or fashion to give any verbal view as it pertains to his or her view, whichever political party they support. Anytime that happens, it means that the police will automatically now be seen and as a political party. But this is what happens in the country. So when you speak about a race war, the problem with the police service, if one person is arrested, I'm a PNM. If I arrest another person, I'm a UNC puppet. If I clear one gate, it's because I'm a Rowley boy. If I clear another gate, I'm a Kamala boy. Because some people, everything they see in life is red or yellow. They can't help it. So every comment that the police makes must be to help their party and to discredit the other. The day I do something that does not benefit them, does not attack the party they do not like, or does not support the party that they support, then the police is this or that. The police, we don't have time for that. If your whole life is based on red or yellow, that is you. The police service, we based on red, white, and black. And as it pertains to this country, I am not seeing it. I am seeing the situation of Black Lives Matter being something that is, by certain individuals, there's a deliberate intent to try to demonize, undermine, and discredit the police service. It is not working. Yesterday, some of them, they were weighed, measured, and found wanting. They tried. They threw the bait, we didn't take it. So the persons would continue to demonize the police service. Someone sent his children there to ask people to call names of persons just to bring back up hurt of a family of someone being killed. That is the way they are. People will try to use the police service as a stepping stool for their own political ambition. That is the only concern that we have, which is why we'll continue to drive home the point. We are not the enemy. We didn't kill the 538 black lives last year. We stood front. And some of our officers got a bullet to their chests and best saved them by trying to save those black lives out there. And if in our duty, we confront those individuals who try to kill more black lives and we do what we must to save our lives, so be it. It gives us no pleasure to do it, but the fact of the matter is that our police officers, they are black lives as well. And should those black lives be saved to protect themselves if fired upon?
Commissioner, could you give us an update on the Naomi Nelson case? I know you issued a release a couple of days ago in response to the political party that you mentioned. Could you give us an update? You made some findings in that statement as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. The findings of the young girl who was unfortunately hit, again, when it is that our investigations, where the police officer was standing, he was fired upon, he was ambushed. We have the bullets that actually went and hit the police vehicles. This wasn't police, the police didn't shoot there. It had the police officer, the bullet hit him and struck him in his chest. He could have been another black life lost, and there seemed to be no concern for that. And by that police officer being hit in his chest, it means that there was an illegal firearm with some criminal using an illegal firearm, firing an illegal round to hit a law-abiding police officer. And there was never concern about that. The round that actually hit the child, that when it is, there was nothing from the forensic department that can show in any form or fashion that it came from the firearm of the police officer. Having said that, the investigations would continue, but as I mentioned, where the police officer was and where he was facing, the girl was behind the police officer. So I don't think when this is a police officer is shooting, he will be shooting with the weapon pointed behind his head in the opposite direction. Where the officer was shooting, it means that someone was shooting at the police officer. And let me also add, just by the way, in case people are trying to clarify, and it is international as well. If a police officer is involved in confrontation with someone else, if, say for example, you in the media, if someone is facing me and you are shooting at me, and I have a right now to shoot back, because by that police officer getting hit in his chest, it means that someone was trying to kill him. So I will ask anyone here, is it the right of the police officer to shoot back? The answer is obviously yes, because the bullet struck him in his chest. He was actually in the hospital for a few weeks because the bulletproof vest could only do so much. So it means that even if one, and which is not the case, but even if that young girl was in the direction of where the police officer was and he aimed at the criminal to save his life and that his shot hit the girl, the police officer is not going to be charged for murder. He was trying to save his life. But somehow in this case, he was actually in the opposite direction. So when people are trying to find every way, form or fashion, no one is mentioning the police officer who put his life on the line. He was ambushed by criminal elements, and then he fired back to save his life.
One more question, but it will be a three-part question, if you don't mind.
But it is three questions.
Just one question, ABC. You made mention of the Hackshaw file going to the DPP. One of the issues that were raised was that the money was going into his personal account. What, if anything, going forward will be done to have a separate account set up for officers who solicit monies for the Ttps? Okay,
I am not too pleased with that style, what took place there. It is not the ideal situation. It opens the window for the possibility and the perception of inappropriate financial transactions. And you're right, and I can't deny that, but it does not mean that the person did anything unlawful. This was a practice that has been taking place based on my investigation for years. When I became Commissioner of Police, I put an end to this, which is why we formed the I Support Our Service. From the I Support Our Service, I do not want anyone in the private sector giving funds to a police officer by cash or kind, and then giving it to him, and then he's just going to give it back to someone else. That can cause the window of opportunity, which is what crime is. Crime is a product of opportunity. So you give the police officer $50,000 check, and he says to deal with a children's Christmas party, and he decides to spend $10,000. The individual who provided it believes that everything was spent. And that is why, I'm not saying it is done in this situation, but that is why I've put a stop to it, so that any funds that the public would like to provide to the private sector, to the police service, through the I Support Our Service, we have it down to every single thing, whether it is goods, services, or cash. It is given, it is recorded, it is documented, and then it is then sent to whichever location or place that we feel it can be of best use. I would like to take this opportunity to also to add, based on a concern by the Prime Minister, we had a similar situation as it pertains to persons who have private events. The private events, so you have a carnival fete, you will go to the court will state that you need 100 police officers, and then the police now will tell you have to pay cash to the police officer, one police officer, or a check to be given to one police officer. This was also a practice before. Years. This can cause a window of perception that, okay, the police officer might say 100 police officers, he or she will only send 50 and keep the other 50 for him or herself. We have put a stop to that as well. So now I've established a system where there's a specific account. So whenever the court directs the numbers and the costs, it goes to the police account, and the police will now direct it straight to the account of the police officers. So I can't change what happened in the past, but I could give you assurance that we have rectified these things for the future. B.
No B.
No, let B. Yeah, B and C, and then we could wrap. No.
You made mention as well of TTPS officers being extremely well during the time of COVID. Some of them, not during the time of COVID, previously received medals. Are you making a call for your officers to receive any kind of recognition for the work that they have done during COVID, whether it be internally or nationally?
I would not like to put pressure on any organization, but I will think that if medals were given to the law enforcement agencies because they did 2 days of good security work for COVID and the summit, what the protective services have done this time around, I think it deserves a medal. These officers have operated above and beyond the call of duty. They have done all that is required and more. And especially if we compare to what we've seen in police departments around the world. Some of them went overboard, they abused their authority, they beat persons. You've seen it, persons were hitting persons with sticks, arresting them. None of that took place during COVID. But and likewise, many police departments, persons went absent. There was a 10% degree of absenteeism in some police services around the world. We had zero. In fact, we had officers who came back out to work. We had officers working 2 and 3 shifts constantly. How they operated their public relations, the roadblocks, the class that was shown, it showed that we are second to none. And it states why it is that it is the most noble of all professions. These officers were willing to put their lives for country. And by that alone, I think a medal will be the smallest contribution that should be given in recognition for what they have achieved.
And how do you plan to praise your officers for the good work that they did?
By telling them thank you. That's it? Okay, thank you very much.